Dr. Alger, thank you so much for your presentation. I saw this a couple of years ago and we've been watching to see what happened with Arizona, and particularly impressed with the special needs children. And I don't know if you can speak to that, particularly how that has impacted them, but it was very impressive when I saw it.
Thank you, and thank you for watching what we're doing. One thing that's so exciting about seeing innovations happen in the States is that we can watch our friends and neighbors and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I'm so happy to report that we have expanded opportunities for parents of special needs children, not only through tuition tax credit scholarships, specifically our Lexi's Law, but also through ESAs, because it's so critically important that parents, many of whom, finding a private therapeutic placement for a special needs child can be terrifying. It's so expensive, and I do know from personal experience it's terrifying. Not just finding the right school, but being able to use just a portion of what the state would have used to tailor those therapies for all sorts of tutors and other learning options to help children. It's been called a godsend.
Well, I appreciate that. And the other aspect of this is, like when you were talking about 90% of the money that they get on the card, 90% of that money, now the 10%, is my understanding that stays with the home district that they live in, that the school district gets to keep 10% of that money. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct. So it's 90% of the base formula funding, and that would include any associated rates for special needs, grade level, poverty level, and so forth. But the district keeps that remaining 10% of the base funding, so that would be revenue, but there are also about half a dozen other categories of state revenue the district would keep, plus local and any federal revenue associated with that child.
The other thing that I do have several other people that want to ask you questions, but in regards to that, when it's put on a card, like a debit card that they utilize, how do you keep them from using that, going down to the store and buying something different other than that? How is that controlled?
Thank you for that question. That's a very important question. That's one of the things that we had to hammer out before it would even be considered as a policy in Arizona. By the way, we have a zero tolerance policy for misspending. Sort of like the military that uses travel cards. If there's any question, the account's immediately frozen. We have a zero tolerance. They work like a debit card, but it's not like the debit cards I would use. We have our PIN number, go down to the bank and get our cash. There is no PIN number, no cash can be withdrawn. The parent handbook, rather than hundreds of pages of legislation, it's about 30 pages. It's updated every year, and it's very clear on what expenses are allowed and what are not. So parents know the process runs. You apply from January through April. You're well informed. There are people to help you, so you know exactly what you can spend it on and if it's not. If there's any question, you actually have someone you can contact. You have a representative you can contact, help you with the process. And if you make a mistake, your account's frozen. If it was an oops, a genuine oops, you provide the receipt and the account is unfrozen. But if it was misspending, we don't ever get to the fraud level, because if there's any misspending, it's frozen. You have to pay it back before it's unfrozen.
Thank you. Representative Smart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, ma'am, for this informative presentation. You know, I have been real interested in this because we have so many children and students in Kentucky with different types of learning disabilities and our families. But at a couple of conferences that I've attended, I heard reports from Cleveland and I believe Florida that had had some problems with this. And so as we think about the physical irregularities and some of the education deficiencies that they've had in using this, how would we navigate so that we wouldn't come up and do the same things these other states have done?
Thank you for your question, Representative Smart. One of the most important things is we're all here because we want the very best for all children. in their learning opportunities, but we also have a responsibility to be good stewards of public dollars and the public trust. When things like that happen, we wish they wouldn't, but they do. That's why, especially learning from Florida, and Florida has learned from us, Arizona and Florida tend to be very friendly rivals in the school choice movement, parental choice movement. The more transparency you can have, I like the zero tolerance policy we've put in place, because we don't even want to go near public funds being misused, because every dollar that's squandered through fraud or misspending does not go to a child. So we take that deadly seriously. That's why we have the reporting requirements. Very strict application procedures. We're very clear about what is acceptable, what's not. We have audits. We don't just have regular audits. We have unannounced audits. All accounts are audited. We are putting in place a telephone hotline to report fraud. And again, any suspicious funding, anything, the account's frozen. So I would recommend, I think Arizona has done a really, really good job on transparency and immediate accountability. So your account will be frozen. We'd rather freeze an account and have a little bit of inconvenience for a parent for 1 to 3 days than foster mistrust in the program, because it's a life changer.
So what happens to the child if that account is frozen? Do they go back to the public school?
They go back to the public school.
So
But
how often does that happen?
I'm not aware that it has happened at all.
Oh, okay.
We put very stringent policies in place to avoid that, because we don't, this is for children. It's not for the adults who want to misspend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at the California schools, what is the total enrollment of the, in California?
In California, it's, I want to say 35 million. 35 million thereabouts, it's over 30 million.
What, the schools that they're enrolled in, are they considered a charter school?
California does allow charter schools. So some of them are, some of them aren't.
So what is the percentage enrolled in those schools as in the public school? Would you know that?
Off the top of my head, it's not quite as high. There are more charter school students. It's not quite as high as Arizona. It's close, but not as high. Arizona has a slightly higher proportion. So I think it would be around 4%.
4%.
Around. I would have to verify that, but it's thereabouts.
4% in the charter schools, or if that's what you're...
Yes. I think it would be around there. I'd be happy to verify that. With the latest numbers, it's going to be about that.
But yet, you think that 4% has made a difference in the rating of the schools?
California's charter school laws are very different than Arizona's. It depends on how much freedom you have. There are certainly beat the odds schools that do amazingly well, but California is not a friendly regulatory environment to some of the best charter schools, and some of the best charter schools, I would say, absolutely exist in California. And they're not allowed to replicate. There are enrollment caps. There are all sorts of strictures that I think should be removed, sir.
In those schools in either state, do they require the certified teachers?
California, yes. Arizona, no.
Pardon?
California, yes, it's a requirement. Arizona, no.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Danny Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today. Of the students who left in Arizona that participated in this program, what percentage actually left the public school system?
That's 1,300. Right now, it would be around 1%. We have just under 1 million public school students, so it would be around 1%.
So the fiscal impact is going to be relative to the percentage of students that actually leave the public school system.
Yes, as always, just as if students were to move out of a neighborhood or move out of state.
Are there any controls on that, or is it just hasn't been an issue?
I'm sad to report that we did put in a cap as a political compromise. It's a cap that disappears, and I would oppose that. It's very, very bad policy, because even though the cap disappears in 2020, at the current rate of growth, we're going to have more than 1,000 children, possibly more, on waiting lists. So, sadly, we do have a cap. That would not be a policy recommendation of mine.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask one more? You spoke about the special needs children, and I'm assuming that most of the families, special needs children, are those that are more severe, that take advantage of this program. Is that accurate?
There's actually a range. I can tell you based on the average ESA dollar amount is around $14,000, which indicates to me, because for student privacy, they don't report lots of details about children, just various disabilities. The average ESA is about $14,000. Disability categories range between $5,000 and $30,000, so we're talking moderate to severe. Would be my guess based on the average ESA account figure.
It is, as a father of a child with special needs, within our state, in visiting different schools, there are significant differences. So even with a child with minor to moderate special needs, I can see the advantage in that. But I also understand with minor special needs that it is advantageous for those students to be in a public setting and be integrated in with typically developing children.
And what's interesting about the parents who are using this, pardon me, the parents who have spoken out have said it's a lifesaver, because whatever setting, you need to make every option available, because with the tutoring, with all of this, they can make those sorts of transitions later. They can graduate high school, they can go on to college, and that's going to be so important to work on that integration, and that's why you need those sorts of tailored options.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Carney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, ma'am, for your presentation. You've thrown out a lot of percentages, 90%, 10%. Could you break that down, though, in dollars? Because 90%, 10% per pupil in Arizona is going to probably be much different than Kentucky. So could you do that for me?
Sure. In Arizona, it's going to work out to be the base funding is going to work out, 90% of the base funding is going to be $4,000 and change. It's going to be about $4,000. Depending on a child's, we call them exceptionalities, that will range anywhere to 5. It could, I'm not aware based on the numbers, that we have a lot of children in this category, up to $30,000 if you have multiple brain injury, multiple disabilities, things of that nature. Runs around, the average ESA account is about $14,000. So if you were to go into Kentucky, if I'm not mistaken, the average SEEK funding right now is about $3,500. That's the base, just your base funding, and then what the weighted funding would be for the child's age, disability, poverty status.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we could, please. I'm really interested in the special needs portion again. You know, I'm just going to be pretty frank and bold. We all know the makeup here, and we know the issue and how charter schools are going to go for some time, but I would beg this General Assembly to at least consider this issue with special needs students. There's so many. We have one class now at the school I teach in. I think we have 6 autistic students in one grade level. And autism is on the rise, if you know the research. And there's so many programs that really can't be provided in our general schools that can benefit students of any special need, particularly though with some of these very special areas. So I would hope that we could at least look at that issue as we move forward. I'm begging you all to do that. Last question, not near as serious as that statement there, but I do have this, and I think this is something that will come up as the debate goes on. It's already coming up some with their private schools. What about athletics? Student who participates that, then wants to maybe participate in that public school athletics. How's that been addressed?
We don't address that specifically, except insofar as a public school child who, for example, wants to take summer school classes. You have your ESA funds. You can use your ESAs to pay for that. If you are not enrolled as a public school student, if you are not, you've taken those funds and made another option, you cannot double dip. The law is very clear. However, Arizona students can take summer school, but you pay for it. The summer school classes at your neighborhood public school, there's a charge, and you can certainly pay for that. That's fine. The same would work with athletics, especially. I'm thinking of maybe swimming therapies. That schools with swim programs and swimming therapies, all of that. You could use your funds if you wanted to. Use a program at your local public school that you liked, or another program. But athletics, there are so many athletic programs through your local government, the parks, through private providers. Homeschoolers are a great example. You want to know where the most innovative, different sort of programs are going on, the latest activity, call up a homeschooler, because they're going to have the beat on everything. So parents find a way, and with those ESA funds, they can find exactly the right program, sports, academics, therapies for their child.
Thank you.
Representative Belcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for sharing with us today. I have a couple of questions. Retired principal and had quite a few special education programs in my schools, some of them very severe. You may have one child who needs OT services, PT services, speech services, maybe the help of a nurse. How is $4,000 going to cover that, and what happens when the money card runs out?
Thank you. That's an excellent question, and that's something that your heart stops about, because you think of children like this, and it's like that money couldn't possibly pay for everything they need. Not much shocks me when I read education numbers anymore. But at the end of the first year of Arizona's program, and again, the children who are using this range from mild or moderate all the way up. At the end of the first year of the program, the combined leftover funds across all parent ESAs amounted to more than $5,000 left over in parents' ESA accounts. That tells me some parents, it could be very expensive, but in some cases it's not as expensive as we think. What I can tell you definitively is, you ask an Arizona parent, given a chance between having something and nothing, give them a chance and they're going to move heaven and earth to exercise choice. These people will mortgage their houses. They will take on extra jobs. Parents of special needs children, really any parent, all children are special. They will do whatever it takes. You would think that, because this money can't pay for everything, we really shouldn't bother. It changes children's lives. It makes all the difference in the world. Is it maybe going, let's say instead of, you only get $25,000 instead of the $30,000 your public school district would get? That's going to get families a lot closer to what their children needs than absent a program.
Again, I don't know that much about Arizona. I do know that much about Kentucky. And I can assure you with the IEP programs and things, our children, I know in Bullitt County, are getting those services, and parents are not having to pay for them, not having to mortgage houses. The next question I have, parents, educators work years to get mainstreaming. I don't know if that's a term you're familiar with or not. For those who aren't, that is, again, having the most restricted environment for the children, what needs they really, really need, and then for the other activities, they're out into a regular classroom. This was done, again, because children need that interaction with other children. They need the modeling about how to behave. your parents don't have this. How do they fix that for the children?
I would respectfully disagree that parents don't know how to mainstream their special needs children.
Well, I'm not saying they don't know how, but the facility, I mean, I had a school of 700 kids, and they were with those kids on a daily basis. If I'm doing my child at home, bringing those services into my home, which is the way I understand this to happen, I'm not going to have the ability to have them interact with all of those other students.
It's not a one-size-fits-all. Some parents may be doing some home education, but they're sending them to therapies, and the goal of special education therapy, whether mild to very severe, is you want your child to thrive in the world. The world isn't in a bubble. So these children are not just at home with mom and dad cocooned from the world. The goal of any serious special education therapy is to help that child survive and thrive in the world as an adult. So the idea that because parents are in charge of services, they're somehow being cocooned at home or being isolated if they're not in a public school classroom just isn't the reality of the breadth of special education services and therapies that our parents are utilizing.
One more question, sir. So then they are with other children at some point in time? Because I'm not talking about going to a therapy session. I'm talking about being with other children, playing with other children, learning from other children. So those services are provided?
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, that's the last thing parents want.
I would hope.
Well, parents of special needs children, they live and breathe this. One of the biggest fears special education children parents have is, dear Lord, what's going to happen when my husband or I pass and my child doesn't have us anymore? I would say that the parents of special needs children feel that much more acutely than a parent, and I don't want to pit parents against parents, but it's so acute, the thought of, if I have only this much time to get my special needs child ready to be out and thriving and happy in the world. So they take that deadly seriously.
Thank you. I still don't think I understand your program, but thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Belcher. I have two more questions. Representative Palumbo is going to be next, and then Representative Stone, and after that, I'm going to have to cut it off so that we can move on to our next topic. So, Representative Palumbo, you are next, and then followed by Representative Stone, and then we'll move to our next topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, if the funding follows the child, what happens to the public schools in these states?
Thank you for that. That's the number one question I get is, what happens to public schools? What we've seen is when 90% with this program, 90% of the state funding follows that child. The public district does not have the expense associated with that child, gets the funding for another year. It's 10% of state funding, 100% of local funding, 100% of federal funding for a child they are not educating, and they have at least a year to adjust. So what actually happens is their per pupil funding goes up. Here's how. I know people always look at me like, what are you talking about? Here's how. You have the same amount, you've basically the same amount of money, but you have fewer children. So you have the same amount of money spread around a smaller group of children, your per pupil funding goes up for a year. You're being paid for a child you don't have.
Ma'am, so the funding doesn't follow the child?
Only a portion of it follows the child. 90% of state formula funding. The local, the federal, and 10% of the state that's not included, that 90% stays with the district.
Mr. Chairman, could we have this information sent to us, please?
Absolutely. Dr. Alger, is that something that we can make sure we get sent out to everyone?
Sure, and what I actually did at the end of the appendix table, I actually did a county by county, district by district breakdown. Now granted, I truncated it because as we all know, there are about 50 state, local, and federal funding subcategories for readability. I did not include those. Those numbers will likely look a little bit higher than what you have presented on your State Department of Education. They do a really good job. I use the federal numbers that the state reports, so those numbers will seem a little bit higher, those per pupil numbers, because they'll include things that would not be included in the 90% that would fund students' ESAs, like staff development, school bus purchases, school lunch programs, and employee benefits.
And that's page 15 in your packet, if your members are trying to find it. So, thank you very much. Representative Stone?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be brief and with a rather specific question. And I appreciate very much the information, lots of information for us to consider. And the answer to this question probably would vary a lot from states where there are participants, and any new states might do it differently. But so I would ask my question specifically for Arizona,
Yes.
where you seem to be more familiar with the plan that's being used there. If a parent decides that they would like to use an ESA, and you indicated how they would do that, they go tell the district or the state educational agency, or at the point they do that, do they have some opportunity for counseling as to where they might enroll their children or what services that they might obtain for their children? And if they have that opportunity to someone to advise or counsel them, would it be an independent source, independent of the public schools or independent of providers?
That's an outstanding question. And I can tell you that both Florida and Arizona do this. Other programs are just coming online now. In Arizona, the Arizona State Department of Education does a great job. They're also in the parent handbook. Here are all the providers. There are workshops. The providers come and give parents information. There are also nonprofits, like various local nonprofits in the area. The Hispanic Coalition for Education Options, for example, does does outreach in the Hispanic Latino community. The Black Alliance for Educational Options, our local chapter, works with the African American community. So it really is a constellation of over half a dozen resources just off the top of my head. And parents rank, actually our Department of Education, the most helpful. Let's have everything right there. So parents get a lot of counseling, and they also have a representative whom they can talk to person to person with any questions. So there's a lot of support along the way.
If I just want to and who pays the person who might counsel them if there's an individual, a State Department of Education person?
Yes, the way the program works with administration fees, our State Department of Education administers it. So they get 5% of the total program cost, and the State Treasurer's Department gets 1% for conducting audits.
And they would provide a counselor that you could talk to one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think that would be
Yes, sir.
important. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Alger, thank you again for your presentation. Again, appreciate you being here and traveling to be with us today to explain this a little bit more. We always need to grow and learn more about education options that are happening, particularly following, like I said, with interest what's happening in Arizona. And thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, my pleasure.